Holzer of All Things 3D, Owl Creek Technologies, and I'm here to kind of provide a few tips and tricks that I've learned with the 3 years working with my wife Pamela Scott, who is right now waiting in the waiting room. You should see me in the top little left-hand corner of the screen. I'm on this main page that you would see as a provider. And if you've given out the proper link, and you can see on the screen here, mine is doxymeet@owlcreek.tech. I have actually included a password, and I sent it off to the multiple people. And essentially, I have 3 people joining me, but 2 of them are just myself again, because I'm faking it. And one of them is an iPad, so we can look at an iPad setup, as well as the new Edge browser from Microsoft on another PC, or actually it's a laptop, and then my desktop system here. Okay, so let's go ahead and bring in Pamela Scott. So one of the things before we get started, we did have a technical glitch, and it was making sure her camera was set up properly. So I'm going to go through in that setup after she leaves us, but we're bringing her in here to kind of talk about what, as a therapist, she's experienced. So let me go ahead and jump to my questions that I plan to ask her. And okay, so here we go. Hi, Pamela.
Hey there.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Okay, so as I've told those who are watching, you are my wife, Pamela Scott, who's been a therapist for how many years?
30 long years.
Oh, has it been that long?
Yes.
So one of the things you'll notice is that Pamela takes up the full screen, and I take up a little screen. Now, you can change that, but that's probably not the objective as a therapist. But as you can see, I'm now on the large screen, and she's on the small one. But like I said, I'm not the subject here. The subject would be your client. So with that being said, you have been using DoxyMe for about 3 years. Is that correct, Pamela?
Yes.
Yes, and obviously not all of it has been hopes and prayers. I don't know, something silly. Not everything has been smooth, right?
No, it's been really smooth, but I have you as a tech backup if I run into any glitches. But overall, it's worked far better than I would have anticipated, and I'm really happy with it. I'm thinking of, I haven't told you this yet, but I'm thinking of actually giving up my office space and just doing sessions this way because I really enjoy it, and it's working well for the clients. So.
Well, we have kind of talked about it. Now, if I understand correctly, because I'm the one that set it up, you use a kind of a lapel mic. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, but you know what? I didn't even see it. Where is your lapel mic?
Oh, it's not on. Sorry. Can you hear me anyway? You must have. Yeah, there's the lapel mic.
Yeah. Well, and actually I could tell in the difference in your voice.
Yeah, I took it off when I got up a minute ago. So.
Okay. But there's a good reason that I suggested that she use a lapel mic, and the fact is that she's here. If you notice, she sounded kind of tinny before, and as she brought it up to her neck level, she sounded much better, deeper voice, and the reason for that, not deeper like in male, but a rich voice. There we go. And the reason for that is that this particular mic she's using is kind of a directional type mic. And why would you want to buy something like that? Well, because it isolates the noise around you, and that's one of the I think the better reasons to use such a mic. And if you live in, obviously a lot of us are doing this out of our house. We may just have a small bedroom or something. If you've got kids or a noisy husband, I highly recommend getting something like that. And I'll bring up a link later once Pamela leaves us so that you'll get an idea of the cost. It's really inexpensive. It's about $22, and it plugs right into your computer. It's fairly easy to set up. Now, one thing that it also helps, if you notice, Pamela doesn't use headsets. She hates headsets. Is that right?
Yes, it feels very artificial and it just annoys me. And it's really important for me doing this that I feel natural and I'm free to use my hands. I like the camera
hitting me a little bit lower. I don't want the client just to have a big close-up of my head because I want it to feel more natural, and I want to be able to explain things and gesture, and I want them to have that visual.
So yes, and it seems to work for you. So you're hearing your client through the speakers in your monitor. Now, personally, I don't prefer that and suggested that you wear earbuds, but if they're uncomfortable, if you use the kind of microphone she's using, it kind of rejects that. And the big reason is sometimes you get feedback or howling or echoing, and having that kind of microphone reduces that if that's the direction you want to go as far as listening to your client. So she has extra freedom, and the only thing is she has to put on the lapel mic, which sometimes she forgets when she's done, and she drags the whole computer with her.
No.
Just kidding.
Not true.
No, she doesn't. Actually, she's been, as being a technician for many years and then moving up into director and having to support your wife as far as her technical needs, she's been very positive. She's learned a lot, and she's made this thing work. And like I said, she's been using it for 3 years, and as she said, she's going to be giving up her office and doing this mainly from home. And I have a feeling many of you might be doing the same thing if this extends for any length of time. But I kind of wanted to ask you, since you have an office environment too that you see clients, what's the difference between the two, and what would you recommend to somebody who's starting out in order for their clients to feel at ease in something like this?
Well, at this point, I don't feel any significant difference. I mean, there are differences, but as far as my process and my way of doing therapy, I'm very comfortable with it, and I don't notice any difference. You mentioned earlier about having noisy husbands or kids in the background. I couldn't do it if I had that because it would be too much of a distraction. So for me, it's really important to have a designated office that this is all this room is used for, and to have a quiet home when I'm doing it. And you know that, and so you stay in your work area in another part of the house. I have heard from people who are trying to do this with little kids in the house who are playing, or puppies who are barking. I couldn't make that work. So, or if they're trying to do it in their living room and somebody may go walking through, it's just really important to me to have an environment that this is an office, this is designated just for this, and I've set it up in a way. This is furniture that was in my other office at one point. So that helps me, I think, be in the space of I am working here and I'm processing things with the client in the same way that I would do if we were in the same physical room.
Now, being your husband and helping you move into several offices in the different locations we've been, you like these, what would you call, I wouldn't say muted colors, but rich, subdued colors that make you feel comfortable. And I notice your office is the same way. Would you recommend that if a person has been seeing people in an office, that they should try to duplicate that setting in their home?
I would totally recommend that. Yeah. Duplicate as much as you can the same environment, the same things you do, your same style. And then it's a pretty seamless transition for people. They seem to be really comfortable with it once they try it.
I noticed the subtle advertising of your Owl Creek therapy with the owl in the background. That's kind of cute. Just FYI. Don't. Oh, well.
Since you did it, I guess, huh?
No, yeah, probably. So the other thing that you can't see here, and I can bring up a picture later on, is if you notice the lighting, she has some, it's not actually very harsh, but the way the webcams work, it does look like she has some harsh lighting behind her. So if she didn't have any lighting in front of her, she would be in shadow, and that would overwhelm the camera. So how did we avoid that? Well, now I can put my technical hat on and just tell that if you notice she's well lit. I have some LED strips, cost about $30, that surround her inside of her fold-out desk that provides the lighting she has. And it's pleasant, it's adjustable, so if she doesn't want a lot of light, she's got sensitive light like most of us do. Like right now, there's a good example. She has the lighting off. Notice the harsh shadows now. Please turn it back on. I think I'm in a Okay, so, and notice the warmth now in the image that she has. So, like I said, about $30. You don't necessarily have to go with that, but I do recommend you have some lighting in front of you that's diffuse. And what I did to diffuse her light is I put some masking tape over each of the lighting systems so that it doesn't become harsh, it's soft, and it actually creates a very pleasing glow. But maybe I'm a little biased because, you know, it is my honey, but oh well. So, on that, I have always been very impressed and pleased with that, and I think your clients would agree, and I highly recommend you go in that direction. The other thing is, what we don't see here is that you have a separate webcam, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, one of the reasons she has is because she has a PC that didn't have a webcam. But you can buy some very inexpensive ones. We spent a little bit of extra money and got her a Logitech C930, which is more of an enterprise version. But what that does is give her a wider view. As she said, she can now use her hands, and so her client can also see that kind of image as well. So it really works out well. And one thing I'm going to do real quick here, make sure. I'm on standard definition. I'm going to go to high definition. And one of the things I've noticed with the high definition camera is it truly gives you a full high definition image. So I actually can see more of her room now. So you might want to keep that in consideration. I'm going to drop it back to standard. So if you set yourself up for the normal camera in DoxyMe and then you go to high definition, be aware that you might see more of your room than you want your clients to see. Like maybe you're not wearing any pants or something.
We always wear pants. They may be flannel,
Okay.
but yeah, no.
Just kidding. She's not her. Maybe I'm not wearing any
Maybe
pants.
you're not, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But all you see is my head. I'm just wearing a cap and this shirt, nothing else. No, just kidding. All right, so back to some features. Let me see where we're at in the questions. So as you mentioned, you don't like to use a headset. You've got a webcam on your system now, provides a nice quality image. Some of the webcams that come in laptops aren't very good, especially if you have an older one. So you might want to upgrade. The other thing too, and I'm kind of curious, where are my eyes? Point to my eyes, Pamela.
On the screen?
Yeah, just point to, don't touch it. Where are my eyes? Okay, so why do you keep looking over to the right?
I'm probably just monitoring what I'm doing.
Okay, so you're watching yourself. So, you know, obviously if you're with a client, you might want to look at them once in a while. I think you're autistic or something. No, just kidding. But
I look at you a lot, so I'm
okay, so you're already bored. So the other thing is she's looking down. So if there's a way, and again, her webcam sits right on top of her monitor. So there really isn't that much difference, but you can see that the eye lines don't match. And sadly, DoxyMe does not allow you to adjust that. So you're going to get the best. But kind of keep in mind, if you know where your camera is on, like if you have a webcam, look into the camera itself and think of that as their eyes. I know it's really hard to do.
Well, that would not work for me at all because I have to actually see your eyes. Otherwise, I'm role-playing. If I'm looking up and I'm not looking at you, no, that doesn't fly. Eye contact is really important. You can't fake eye contact.
Okay, but the key is you're not really having eye contact because you're not looking at the camera. So yes, you would have to role play. So that's something to keep in mind.
No, I would nix that. I have to actually be looking at your eyes. Okay. I can't be looking up at the camera. That just wouldn't work.
Okay, so that makes you feel like you have eye contact with me.
Correct.
I don't feel like I have eye contact with you. Like right now, I'm looking at you. Just gazing into your eyes.
But that again, feels uncomfortable to me. That felt intrusive.
Okay, that's interesting. Well, you said that a long time ago, too. Oh, well. So let's get back into some of the other things that we've talked about. As you know, if you look at my screen on the left-hand side here, it has a payment option. Now, that's something you don't use. Even though we signed you up for Stripe, which is a service they use, you don't use that. And you have some reasons for that. Could you kind of identify why you feel the payment system there isn't as useful to you and what you use as a substitute?
Well, honestly, the only reason I don't use it is because we started off using Square, and I know that system very well, and it's easy for me, and it's something else I don't have to learn and adapt. That's the primary reason. And then the other reason, I prefer to bill separately in an email after the session. That's just my preference. I don't like collecting money right at the time of the session. Some people much prefer that. That's just not my preference. I would rather send an email, a day or two after the session. Some people, we have an arrangement where I bill once a month, in which case we keep track of that. Once a month, the end of the month or whatever, they get a Square bill in the email, and it's worked fine. So I just haven't wanted to change a system that's working well.
Makes a lot of sense. And obviously when we did try to use their swipe system, we had some glitches. So that would have been another reason we decided not to go with it. But as you said, it could be convenient for the person that's trying to hit somebody over the head to get their cash. No cash, no service. I don't know. But as you said, you are very comfortable with your clients. You normally don't have any problems with your clients paying.
No.
And your Square system has worked very well. And we've been using that for about 10 years now, almost when they started. So it's been very successful for you, and you're very familiar with it. And stay with what works for you. Okay, so very quickly while we still have you, and before I jump into my own client to show what it looks like on the other end, I want to go through some of the settings real quick. Okay, if you notice often, and since we're recording my screen here, you have a photo capture button. That's something new. Siobhan, Pamela, do you ever use that feature?
I didn't know I had it.
Okay, so if you're a provider, it's called photo capture, and what it allows you to do is capture the photo of the person that's sitting there. And then you can download that image.
Why would one do that?
Well, my guess is that, one, most other teleconferencing systems have, or video conference systems have that feature. And two, I don't know, maybe you want an image, who knows. I know that we've never wanted a picture of our clients.
Well,
so
there's a privacy concern about that, why you would be saving images of someone on your computer. I would never even consider that.
So the other thing that's extremely useful that they've added, that one not being one of them, we're going to skip group call at this point, is screen share. Now, you have one monitor, but you may have other tabs open in Google Chrome, and you have something of an article. Now, what you can do now is screen share, and I can share my screen, and then I can select what I want to send. Now, I have multiple screens, so I'm going to go ahead and select a different screen, but I could also select, as mentioned, a Chrome tab. So what I'm going to share are the questions that I wrote to her. So she can see, now I don't see them, but you can see the questions that I just wrote to you. So if you wanted to show your client something, an article you may have looked up, you can do so now. Now it doesn't interfere with what you see as a provider. As you can see, you don't see the particular thing that I shared with her, but she can see it. Is that correct?
I can see it.
Okay. And then when you're done with it, there's an item at the bottom that says stop sharing. Now you can also ask the client to share something. So let's say they had an article they wanted to show you. Same thing. I don't recommend sharing videos because they take up the bandwidth that you're using in order to have these nice looking pictures back and forth, and that could disrupt that. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. The other thing that might be very useful, especially in a HIPAA sensitive profession as you are in, is this file transfer. And what you can do is you can select the file. Let's see if I can find a nice little picture to send her. Okay, maybe one from today for my COVID-19 special. So let me go to images. Here we go. We'll send her this one. So I can drag and drop it. She can't see this, but obviously the audience can. And now it's uploading it. Now she'll get a little message saying something, correct?
Yep, Mike wants to send you a file.
Okay, so go ahead and accept it.
I did.
Okay.
It's downloading.
And it's downloading. Now I can close my little screen now, and now she can open it up and see that it's the 3D model of the COVID-19 virus. And hopefully that is the only way we ever get in contact with the COVID-19 virus. Because we're using video conferencing.
Can I give a bit of feedback about sharing articles this way or trying to share videos? I often share articles and videos, but I simply send clients a link to those things because then they can read it or watch it whenever they feel like it. And it also reduces the level of complexity with what I'm trying to do in DoxyMe, because even though I've been doing it for 3 years, I think unless a person is very sophisticated, having to do additional things like that during the session is going to be stress-inducing and discombobulating. So there are all kinds of ways to send articles and videos without trying to do it in the midst of the session. So that's just my recommendation. Don't complicate it more than you need to.
And that's probably very wise.
Thanks.
On that, I'm going to complicate a little bit. So let's say you do want to send them a link. Now you said you used email. So are you aware of the chat feature in DoxyMe?
Yes.
Okay. So you can also use that feature where I open up the chat window, and then I just Control-C and Control-V, which is cut and paste, and now I can send you that same link, which shows up in your message. But
if they didn't want to access it until maybe tomorrow, how would they do that?
Well, then they would have to cut and paste it. So
okay.
Yes.
See, so it's much easier just to send them an email to their regular email address with the link to the article or video. Absolutely no reason to complicate it when there's a simpler way.
Well, it's not necessarily a simpler way, but as you said, if the purpose of the 50 minutes or however long they're in you is to have this one-on-one discussion where you listen to their problems, you don't want to confuse them or, more importantly, corrupt this intimate discussion with these technical features.
Well, it's silly. It's silly. And if they want to review a video or an article, that's part of their homework in between sessions. It's not what you use the session for.
Now, I will have to give kudos to DoxyMe. Even though these features are available for the tech head, you can always use the little less than symbol off to the left-hand side that push that bar out of the way so that the only thing that is showing up on the screen is their client. So that way you don't have to see it. In fact, you can expand the screen completely so the only thing that's on their monitor is the client themselves. And all the little menus go away.
Mike,
so
when you say less than symbol, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay.
So maybe you should clarify that.
Well, yeah. Right now it is, I'm going to use another symbol that you don't understand, but on this end, on the recording, my arrow is going to point to it. It's the Hamburger symbol. Remember that thing that we used to go back and forth for years? It's the 3 lines.
Yeah,
on top
where
of
is that?
Well, you don't have it. It's on the provider screen. And the same thing as before, you don't have the less than symbol. And I'm going to go ahead and bring it back up. But it's next to the menu system on the left-hand side of your screen if you're the provider. The client doesn't get that feature. But my point was, by clicking on it, it expands the screen all the way out, and then I can expand the screen even further by clicking on a little icon on the right-hand side, which I think you have as well. A little, like it has little arrows pointing in, bottom right-hand side of the screen.
No, not
Okay,
that I see.
Well, we'll see when I bring up my client if it exists. But what that allows me to do is essentially expand the screen so that the only thing is showing up is the client. And even though you still have your little face there, everything goes away. All the little menus, everything. So all you see is the image of your client, so you can concentrate on them. In fact, the only thing that's still showing up on mine is the chat window, and I think I can even get rid of that. No, it doesn't appear that I can get rid of that. Yeah, so sadly, I can't get rid of the chat, but that's only a little small part of the screen. But everything else goes away. There's no menu bar. There's no little icons on the bottom that has a little microphone and the video. So all you see is the client. So that way you can concentrate on them without having any technical mush on your screen. So I think that's kind of a nice feature. So simple is good, and they've tried to simplify it. If you want to use those other features, you can. If you don't, you don't have to. Just like Pamela said, you don't have to. All right, one other feature we're going to talk about. You've tried it already once, but in a office situation, you might have a client who also brings their husband or wife, children, or whatever, and you may have a group session. You can do the same thing here virtually by clicking on Group Call. And if I'm going to click on it right now, you won't see anything there. But now I'm going to invite the iPad. So I'm going to confirm it. And nothing happened. Oh, there we go. And now I have an iPad. So we have another person with us. And so what happens on my end, and I'm going to mute his mic. What happens on my end is that I see Pamela in the main screen, my main camera up in the right-hand corner, and then the new person right below Pamela, the iPad. And it's basically the back of my head. And I think you see that as well. Now, what's cool is that I can basically focus on that person by clicking on their icon, and then they take over the screen. Was that the case with you too, Pamela? Who took over the screen?
You're still taking over the screen.
But which part of me, the main or the person?
The main you.
Okay, so she doesn't see that person. I do. And then if I click on her, she now takes over the screen. If I click on myself, I take over the screen. Pamela I was going to say get rid of you, but if I wanted Pamela to leave this, I can go up and click on the three dots.
Can I say one other thing
Sure.
before I leave?
Yeah, but let me explain this, and then you can hit end call. But we're not going to do that, but Pamela would like to say one more thing.
Can I say it now?
You may.
One of the difficult things is that some clients will be wandering around the house with their iPhone, and I may get an eye or I may get their nose, and it's just really helpful if before you start telehealth appointments, you send them directions, including if they're using an iPhone, to prop it up somewhere to make sure that their entire face is visible. Just because it can be confusing and distracting if they don't know. And some people don't know to do that. So other people don't know how to use their camera, how to open their camera for access to the computer. Some people, for privacy concerns, have either them or a family member has taped tape over the camera. They don't realize it. So, that can get in the way. Just realize that not everybody is good at this stuff. And so before you start, send them an email with specific directions. And they're simple directions, but which browser to use. The other thing is clients sometimes have a difficult time finding privacy, and especially if they need to talk about their stress with a spouse or stress with their kids or their teenagers. And if other people are home, that's an issue of concern. And I'll notice sometimes people are kind of whispering. And so that's something to always check out with the client. Do you have privacy right now? And sometimes you'll just have to do your best. Sometimes they don't. But it's also helpful. Some people go out and sit in their car and prop their phone up and talk that way so they get more privacy. So flexible ways to adapt and make it work. And I think once you do it for a while, and simply, you can over-explain things because you just love the technology. I just want it to work for me, and I want it to work for my clients. And so I don't do the extra bells and whistles that are optional just because I don't need it. So I give it 2 thumbs up, but make it work for you.
Correct. And these are all options, but my role today was to kind of go through these options so that if you needed them, you could use them. Let's talk about one other thing. You mentioned issues that can come up with your clients. Something that you've experienced personally is if you're using, and many of us are, different teleconferencing or video conferencing software such as Zoom, Skype, or Google Hangouts, they all may have their own requirements and changes in your settings, and that could complicate you going back to your own system. So one of the things that I recommended in a previous discussion is if you've got the capability of setting up a system only for doing your telehealth, as you called it, sessions, then use it just for that. And if you've got a laptop for social reasons, use that. And I know that we kind of cross boundaries in that, and that's something to keep in mind if you want to keep things simple. The more things you add to your system, as I keep saying, and you experience, the more difficult it becomes and more issues for troubleshooting. And then you really have to rely on me a lot. And so I guess that's part of the double-edged sword. Okay, with that, I'm going to go ahead and exit you out of it, but she can leave herself, but we're going to see that on one of the clients. So what I'm going to do now is go through essentially and talk about what she just mentioned, which is, and I'm going to jump to my screen now so that you don't see her anymore. She's now a little bit, but what you can see, and one thing I want you to notice is, oh, I guess the screen is normal for me. Cool. In the past, the other day, maybe I inverted myself. I think that's what I did, so it would look proper on the screen. The other day, I had it inverted, and all the writing was backwards. So it looks like everything is okay now. So when you're watching this video, my screen looks good. Yay. Okay. But the whole point I want to make right now is she mentioned make sure your client has the ability to prop up their phone. So I'm going to go through some recommendations. You can get them on Amazon or Best Buy. They're little stands that you can put your tablet on, and that really helps, and they're like $5 to $10. So I would recommend that you tell your clients, go to Best Buy. They kind of look like this here. They fold out. You put your iPad on it, and really helps so that you don't have it in your hand and you're moving it around and all you see is a nose or a face. That way it stays still. And more importantly, if they're back far enough, you can see their hand gestures and their movement, which I think she's told me is important in determining the mood of your client. You can't do that very well when all you do is see their nose. Okay, that's my input. I'm going to say, actually, why don't you go ahead and hang up, because I'll show them how to do it on our end.
All right. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Pamela. Okay, so notice that she's gone now, and we're just basically looking at me and my iPad. So I'm going to turn to my iPad, and actually, for your benefit, I have a separate screen so I can actually look at my iPad. So we're going to do that right now, and I'm going to bring that in, the full screen. Okay, so now you should see my full screen now. And I've got a haul of mirrors, but that's fine. And let's see if I can. Okay. Oh, it's actually my main screen, so I kind of messed that. No, I was in the right one. Okay. Okay, so not now. We'll put in the name. So if you can see my iPad behind me, you have to start out by putting in your name. So I'm just going to put this as iPad. Bring up the keyboard. I'm going to put in iPad. And then the passcode that you gave them. What I would recommend when you're setting up is to ensure that you use a passcode. This has been a big problem with people who are using Zoom because it immediately takes them into the session. Now we have a meeting room, so we can use that, but if somebody is, as they call the term, spoofing, being somebody they're not supposed to be, and then they wind up in your session, especially if it's a group session, that could be a problem. So I would recommend providing a passcode, and I will give you it, but you could do something simple or complex. I'd probably recommend something. So I'm going to enable the camera and then allow it. Okay, and then I can see a little picture of myself. As you can see, it's checking. And now I should be waiting in the room. So let's see if that's the case. I am. I'm right here. So I'm going to start the call. Okay. And there I am. And you should be able to hear me now from the microphone. Now my microphone is on the standard. So there we are. And then these earbuds have a microphone right here. And what I can do is, well, here we go. So I can put them in, and I would strongly recommend this. The problem is the iPad itself only comes with earbuds, not a microphone. So if you have an iPhone, or if you want to get a third-party version, I would recommend getting that. And then you have the microphone built in, allows the client to concentrate on your voice, as you can see here. I'll look into the camera. And as mentioned, make sure, even though the camera doesn't agree, the video camera for this is right at the top of the iPad. I'm sorry, it's off to the left-hand side of the iPad. So if you want icons, you'll need to look into that, or just look at the screen. So that's what I would recommend, and that would work well. Also, it isolates external noise, so if you don't have a quiet area, you can at least use the earbuds. Sadly, the microphone is not unidirectional. It's unidirectional. It is an omnidirectional, so it does pick up a lot of ambient noise. So it will pick up other external noise in the room. So keep that in mind, especially if you don't have a lot of privacy. If your client, again, doesn't have that privacy. All right, so I'm going to hang up. And this was the iPad. iPhone works very similar, except a smaller screen. And you do have the arrow, if you notice. Actually, let me jump back to that screen. Okay, so if you do notice, you do have that expanded screen here, which I can click. And now I have the full screen. Now, the reason that I have what you're seeing going on there is I am bringing up the camera on the system that's being fed back into it. So that's why it looks wonky. But the other icons on the screen, the microphone, the video camera, the gear, which is for settings, and then hanging up are the same on basically all the browsers. I'm using Safari right now, so the Safari should look very similar on an iPhone. If you press the gear, you can determine what camera you're using. This is very important because an iPad has a front and rear camera, and sometimes it goes to the rear camera, and this is where you would change it. You press the gear, and then you can choose it, or front or back camera. And the same thing with the microphone. I can use the iPad microphone, so it's telling me using the iPad microphone, but the reality is it should have determined that I had another microphone here. So I think when it said iPad microphone, it's basically saying the microphone built in the system. Now, let's say in a group session or the person has a very noisy environment, what I would recommend then is that they click on the microphone, which then mutes it. And by muting it, it prevents their noise from interfering, let's say, in a group call. And if they need to say something, they can just push it again. And that will allow them to speak. And so that's about it. All right, so I'm going to hang up this call by pressing the little, what do you call a handset. Some of you may not even know what a telephone looks like anymore. But that's the call. If you notice, I can now put the information back in, and then I can rate the call so that DoxyMe knows how good it is. Now there's something that I want to show you, and I'll wait till the other call. So let me go back to my main screen again. So here we go. So you notice how I can rate the call. This is important. I would suggest doing that. You don't have to write anything if you don't want to, but let them know how the quality is. All right, so now I'm going to bring in the Edge browser. Now, as mentioned, the Edge browser is Microsoft's new Edge browser, which is completely compatible with this software, and it's running off a laptop. And the laptop, let me take these out. The laptop also has, oh, that's interesting. So let's do this. There we go. The laptop also has earbuds, so we're going to bring up those earbuds. So let's do that. Okay, so let's bring that person in. They've been waiting 40 minutes. They're probably bored. All right, start the call. Okay, so there I am, and what you're hearing now is my voice coming from the microphone in the earbud, and which is right here. And then I can also hear myself speaking, if I were speaking, in the microphone. But I must have the volume down. So I don't hear myself, but as you notice, I do hear the microphone sound. So what does it look like on their end? So let's bring that up. Well, I do have the ability to bring up the camera. Okay, there we go. Let's bring that in. And again, we're getting the same effect, but we should be able to look at, let's go back to the main. There we go. Okay, and then go to full screen. And I don't know why that didn't show up. Okay, so there we go. So this is what I see on the Edge browser. And notice you have the same symbols down here. And then this is the image off the camera. Now notice something really quick, and I'm going to bounce back to, notice the resolution is kind of jagged and so forth. And the reason for that is if we go back to my screen and click on this, notice I'm on low definition. For whatever reason, it seems to resort back to low definition. So what I'm going to do is go to high definition. And if you've got a signal that's good enough for that, notice my signal improves here. But more importantly, look at my signal now versus the one we had before that we're now seeing on their system. So if you notice, I don't have any jaggies around the edge, so the quality is better. So that really works out well. The other thing to keep in mind, now I'm looking at their screen. Oops, let me go to that mouse, sorry. Okay, notice what comes up. I didn't enable the microphone, so I could enable it and bring in the microphone. And again, notice I have different options. So make sure you have the client pick the proper option. Same thing with the camera. This one has different options. So I want to make sure that I bring in the HP True Vision camera, which is when it's on, which is the front camera. And again, it does tell you the front camera. And then the microphone I'm going to leave disabled right now. And then the speakers, depending on what device you have hooked up, you need to make sure that that's set to whatever allows sound to be played. And again, if you're using microphone in a headset like I am here, that could be a problem too. As you can see, my voice can be heard. Okay, so that I will close that. Other than that, you do have the ability to expand the whole screen, just like we did on my system. Okay, and all the menus go away except the ones on the bottom, which should also disappear as well. So on the client, it does not seem to allow them to disappear. Now, what's funny is that I still seem to see myself talk. If you notice, I'm talking down in the bottom left-hand side of the screen, but there's a delay. So that's something else to keep in mind. Now, that delay could be because I'm using high definition, which may essentially what it does is it stores some of these signal before it sends it off and create that delay, which means that the client will not be hearing you in real time, and you might be stepping over each other when you're actually communicating back and forth. So let's do this. I'm going to go back to my main screen, and I'm going to select standard. I'm going to go back and let you see. So the signal is still fairly good. In fact, it didn't. But notice the camera is expanded now. And remember I mentioned that when we had Pamela on, that the camera seems to widen to the standard angle of the camera itself. Now it's contracted or zoomed in to provide just a head. So keep that in mind too. And then you can see me down on the bottom left hand of the screen. There is still a delay. In fact, I will use a clap to kind of indicate it. Notice that I clapped down the bottom, and then it took almost a second. So keep that in mind, that you could have delays in the signal itself. Now, how is my system running here? My laptop over here is running off Wi-Fi onto the internet, going through their system back into another system that's running off of a LAN connection. And if you don't know the difference between one is a wired connection, one is Wi-Fi. If you're a provider, I would make sure that you're using Wi-Fi. And let me jump back to my main screen now, and I'm going to go ahead and drop this person out. And now we're back to this, and then I will bring up my full screen again and myself. There we go. And that's about it. As you can see, it's real easy, but as Pamela said, lots of features. You don't have to use them if it complicates the world for you, but they're there if you need them. Sometimes I have seen her send, and one of the things I didn't stress, if you have a document to send back and forth, do not use email. Please use this system, or if you've got a practice software system that you're working with that has that ability, but do not use email. Don't use the cloud. There is some issues with security from those perspectives. Use your HIPAA compliant system, especially if there are sensitive documents that need to be sent back and forth. So keep all that in mind when you're working with your system. Again, make sure your video camera is nice, crisp, kind of like the signal that I have here. The better it is on your end, the better. And look, you can even see the hair on my shoulder for my dog. So that's a good thing. In fact, if you want, you can blur it a little bit to soften up the signal. In this case, I have a green background that I've changed into this nice little wood scene. But as you saw in Pamela's image, a nice subdued but colorful office, whatever your choice is, whatever your client is used to. Microphone, lapel. I've got one here, or somewhere. Actually, it's off to one side, so my voice, here I worried about Pamela's voice, and I didn't have mine clipped on. Now I have mine clipped on. My voice should sound better now. Boy, you should either be a producer and not part of the acting. All right, so my quality of my voice should be better, but it shouldn't have been too bad over there. But if you can tell now, my microphone being right underneath my chin should have a more rich sound, just like we saw in the example with Pamela. So with that being said, lapel mics work really well. This is a cardioid mic just like hers, so it does a much better job of removing background noise and only getting the noise or the sound that's coming in front of it. With your laptops, make sure that you have something you can plug in. This I'm using off of an old phone, which is a 1/8 jack with 3 rings, which identifies it as an earbud and microphone. This is an old one where I broke one of the ears, so it only has one. So the microphone still works on it. And then for my iPad, which I'll unplug, it is a lightning port type, which I think all the iPhones now come with, because sadly they don't have an ear jack anymore. So this also works in an iPad. So if you've got both, use them. It's a much better quality signal. More importantly, it allows the client the privacy and attention to you as the therapist. Okay, I think that's about it. I appreciate you tuning in, and I hope having Pamela on helped you from a provider's perspective. And bye.